On today's show, does the NBA, or should I say the Clippers schedule, say something about their expectations for this upcoming season? No Christmas game, no nationally televised opener. Are they floating under the radar, and how much of it has to do with the Intuit Dome coming next season? Going to be talking about it all on today's Locked On Clippers.
Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, born and raised in Los Angeles and going into my 19th season as a Clipper fan. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod and subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA Clipper, LA sports, and NBA history content. And Locked On Clippers, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And I want you to comment on YouTube, because you can also get Locked On Clippers on YouTube, what you think about the Clippers schedule and how much of it do you think has to do with the Intuit Dome coming next season, and this being the last season in the Staples Center, which I'm going to be talking about in this episode. And do you think it makes us under the radar? If you want to comment on any of those things, please feel free. I try my best to read all the comments, but this episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs, the best leg wear around on the market anywhere. But before we get into Bird Dogs, we got to talk about the main topic, and that is your Clippers and the fact that I thought I would do an episode on the schedule, and there's been a lot of talk about it. And I saw a very, very disturbing statistic again today referring to the Clippers schedule. And once again, it comes from the Locked On Network's very own Matt Moore of Locked On Nuggets. And he tweeted today that over the last 40 games, the Clippers travel 48% more miles than the median team in that time span. And he said, quote, "It's just a massive difference between the Clippers and most teams." Mind you, this is the guy that hosts Locked On Nuggets. I'm not even the one that's bringing this up. But now I am, because god damn, that sounds brutal. That sounds awful. I mean, I already did an episode on the schedule and why I don't think it was very good, very favorable for the Clippers, especially a team that has such injury concerns. And this makes me even more nervous that the Clippers are going to try to go get James Harden, because they're afraid of the lack of availability with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And based on that statistic, and especially it being the second half of the season when we're getting ready for a playoff push, I mean, that makes me very nervous. Now, I don't believe, and this is my honest opinion, that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George's injuries last season had anything to do with them being overworked. And I don't even think they would say that. I think it was just being on a basketball court in a contact sport, and things happen. I think it was just unfortunate. Some of it's just unlucky. Paul George and lower body and his landings, that's a conversation for somebody that's more qualified than me to talk about it. But I do get nervous when Paul George lands certain times. Kawhi Leonard, I think the guy just has really bad luck, and we all know about his degenerative knee and all that. But it's interesting with him because sometimes we don't even see the injury happen. But that's basketball, isn't it? However, to the main point, the schedule is very brutal, especially at the end of the season. Now, hopefully Russell Westbrook and the depth that the Clippers have, and mind you, we are still deep. We still got an Ivica Zubac. We still got a Mason Plumlee. We still have a Bones Highland. We still have Norman Powell, who's capable of scoring 18 points a game on a nightly basis. We still have Terrence Mann. We still have Nicholas Batum, who this will be his last season based on the statement he made a couple of years ago, I believe, maybe a year ago, that he was going to retire after the 2024 Olympics. So this will be the last season of Nico, and I would love to be the team that sends him off into the sunset. Of course, I would say with the championship, but at least with a good season, and hopefully he plays well And I think he's just been a great, great loyal soldier to the Clippers. Obviously, when I say loyal, I don't mean it in the sense of like, I know you might be saying, how can he be loyal to the Clippers? He's been like here for 4 years, but he was a free agent. He did come back, and he's just, I think, done such a great job of interacting with fans, and he's been a really great player to root for. He's been available. You kind of hear his thoughts, and he's been one of the spokespeople for the team, in my opinion. And I'm a big fan of Nicholas Batum, so I would hope he ends the season well, or ends his career well, and it's this season with the Clippers. But I will say this, to the main point, the Clippers are deep. We are a deep team, so I think that even with the concerns to Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, it all comes down to them being able to play 60-plus games. And I honestly don't believe that the schedule will hurt them as much. What I am afraid of is that the Clippers are going to load manage them like crazy because they're so afraid due to the schedule that, they're going to get hurt in the playoffs or whatever. But I've already made my stance clear on that. If it's not a Kawhi Leonard back-to-back and it's not some nagging injury that they currently have, they've got to play if they're 90% or more, because there's no guarantee you're going to be healthy for the playoffs, as we saw last season. So why don't we just go out and try to win as much as we can and build the chemistry and the good habits and confidence that comes from team wins. So the one moral of the story, the schedule is hard and the Clippers are not being done any favors. Now, I'm going to talk about how much that relates to the fact that the Clippers are leaving the Staples Center after this season. But before I do that, I want to talk about the fact that the Clippers, I made a mistake last episode, have 22 nationally televised games. That's the number I said in the last episode, but I said we were tied for 10th. We were actually tied for 11th. But, who really cares about that small detail? At the end of the day, got to try to be as accurate as I can on here. But the Clippers have a decent chunk of nationally televised games, but that's definitely the lowest amount in the Kawhi Leonard, Paul George era, which, again, as I talked about in that one, it's because I don't think that the NBA is super confident about who's going to be suiting up for the Clippers on a given night, and that's very, very valid. Because if Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are healthy, a lot of people would love to watch us play. But when one of them's out, both of them are out, that's a complete letdown for the casual fan. And for even an NBA fan who's just like, I could probably watch a better game than that. This ragtag Clippers team, they might win this game, but that's not going to tell me anything about them in the long haul, really. We're going to see the Clippers only have a chance if Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are healthy. That's the way it goes. And so we're going to need them to play 60-plus games, and I think they can do it. I think we don't have to be super, super crazy with the load management, in my opinion. I know it's not a popular one, but I think you got to try to play. Besides the Kawhi back-to-backs, there's going to be stretches where you're playing a lot of games and, not so many nights. There's going to be stretches where you're playing a back-to-back and then one day off and you play again, 3 games in 4. We have the most. We got shafted by the NBA and the schedule makers. Absolutely. We seem to always do. And it's really, as Brian Windhorst said on ESPN a couple of days ago, it's gone worse the last couple of years. But here's the positive. I don't want to sound all doom and gloom because ultimately, I kind of like it. I kind of like that we don't have an opening game in front of the world. Because in the Kawhi Leonard, Paul George era, we've only had the opening game in front of the world besides the season that Kawhi Leonard didn't play. We played a home opener against Memphis on local TV that I attended. Very fun game, by the way, even though we lost narrowly. But opening night of the 2-1-3 era, one of the most hyped up regular season games, in my opinion, in the history of Los Angeles basketball. Clippers, Lakers, AD's debut, Kawhi's debut. What an electric game. I was watching it senior year at my house at UMass. And man, I was on edge like it was a playoff game. And then the following season, obviously no fans post-COVID, but it was Clippers, Lakers again in front of the world. And Paul George got some get back for the whole summer of him being clowned after the bubble. Or should I say the fall? It was just a couple of months, right? The bubble ended in September and the season started in December. So then we had this past season against the Lakers again, and we won. So every single one have come against the Lakers. So for it to come on opening night, or this season's opening night, to come against the Portland Trailblazers, yeah, it's Scoot Henderson's debut, but just going to be a game on Bally Sports Northwest and Bally Sports SoCal. And I think it could be a very solid Clipper victory to start the season off and just go about our business. First 4 games not on national TV. Hopefully we're 4-0. And then we play the Lakers in front of the world. And after winning 4 games in a row with a little bit of confidence, Lakers have a much tougher schedule to start the season. They'll probably have picked up a loss or 2, I hope. Go in and win that game. 5-0. Now we're talking. But now, you know what I'm doing? I'm getting too excited again. So coming up, going to go more in depth about what being under the radar means. And when I say under the radar, I mean compared to the last couple of years of the Kawhi, Leonard, Paul George era. What does it mean for the Clips? Going to be talking about that coming up. I got to tell you a little something about Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs are the best leg wear you can find anywhere, and they make you look good for several reasons. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, which really give you a toned look. And Bird Dogs shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. And they fit way better than regular shorts because they're made of a stiff They are made better than regular shorts that you typically have the stiff restricting cotton, and Bird Dogs fixed that issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice your movement. You can still move around, still do even athletic things or semi-athletic things without a problem with Bird Dogs. And Bird Dogs uses anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long and not smelling like dookie. Just go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or enter promo code LockedOnNBA for a free white tech hat. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA or promo code LockedOnNBA for a free white tech hat. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Woo, 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 woo. All right, so let's keep it going talking about the Clip Show being under the radar. So I know tied for 11th in nationally televised games is still a good amount, but relative to the other Kawhi Leonard and Paul George years where they've both been healthy, and when I say healthy, I mean not 2021-22 season. That's not that much. Those ones we had upwards of 30. And in that first season, I believe around 37 or 36. Like, it was really up there. It was, just touching as a Clipper fan to see us be in the public eye so much. Because I still remember the days where we're getting less than 10 nationally televised games. Some seasons maybe less than 6. And it's just amazing to see that many eyes on the LA Clippers. Like, touching. But 22 games is still a good amount. It's more than the old days, but it's not too much where people are like constantly criticizing us. I think it's much better for us to float under the radar. And why do I think that's important? Well, it just feels like, for me as a fan, whenever we flow under the radar, less eyeballs, less expectations on the Clippers, we always seem in recent history to just prove people wrong. But when we have the weight of the world on our shoulders, we have all the expectation, we seem to crumble. I want to give an example from way back when. And when I say way back when, I don't even mean that long ago. But the first season of Lob City, right? One of the reasons that season was so satisfying, in my opinion, was because I went into it thinking, we got Chris Paul, we got Chauncey Billups, we got Caron Butler, we have been terrible for years. Let's get into the playoffs. Let's just get into the playoffs and see what happens, and we'll build from there. But we not only just went to the playoffs, we got the 5th seed, and we beat a Memphis Grizzlies team that was 1 game away from making it to the conference finals the previous season. And we beat them in the first round in a Game 7 at their home, including a Game 1 comeback where we came back from 27 down. Shout out Nick Young, Kenyon Martin, Reggie Evans, and the crew. And that made that season very satisfying, even though we got swept by the Spurs. But the next season, I had all these expectations. I said, you know what? We went to the second round. It's time to go to the conference finals. Second full season, Chris Paul Blake. And I mean, throughout the season, we really made my expectations keep skyrocketing. Like, just keep going higher and higher. The December to remember, longest winning streak in Clipper history. And then we go 56-26. Best Clipper record ever. And then we play the same Memphis team that lost Rudy Gay and that we swept in the regular season go up 2-0. I'd never been so overly confident as a Clipper fan in my entire life. And then the 4 games right after that followed, and I was a laughing stock at school. That was one of the most brutal endings of any Clippers season I can think of. And the expectations were so high. So the next season we got Glenn Rivers. I was like, you know what? I don't even know what to think of this team. The regular season doesn't matter. All that matters is how we do in the playoffs. And the Western Conference is brutal, so we'll just have to see. I'm not going to lie. If I had to pick any season that I was a bad fan of the Clippers, it would be 2013-14 because I literally just missed like 20-plus games because I was like, the regular season doesn't matter. You know, I was saying it back then. So, but man, I would do anything to go back to those days. I took it for granted so much because the seriousness back then was way higher than now in the regular season league-wide, and I took it for granted. But it was mostly in regards to my own team, not the league. I was still watching a lot of basketball, but in 2013-14, I was like, we did 56 wins, and then we lost in the first round, so we'll see what happens in the playoffs. And that's when we set a franchise record that still stands to this day of 57 wins that season. But against Golden State, I wasn't super confident. I was like, let's see what happens. This is a really good team. They made it further than us last year in the playoffs when they beat Denver and lost to San Antonio in the second round. So I was like, let's see what happens. And of course, we get that Game 7 win, a high-scoring Game 7 at the Staples Center, a top 5 game, probably top 3 game that I've ever been to in my life. I was in the 300 section for that. What an atmosphere. What a game. The emotion after the Sterling incident that had happened in the series, I'll never forget. And you know what? Everybody knows I'm not a huge fan of this guy, but when Glenn Rivers let out that fist pump and was high-fiving fans, oh my God. And after I had been so devastated the previous year about the Memphis series, I almost started bawling my eyes out. Like, that was so emotional to go back to the second round after that previous year and all the stuff with Donald Sterling. It's nothing compared to what the players and the coaching staff and the people within the organization were actually feeling, because at the end of the day, I'm a Clipper fan, but their names are attached. That's their boss that's getting outed as a racist. So I just know that was an awkward situation and very tough. And, it may have been a slightly disappointing ending in the second round, but I didn't expect us to beat Oklahoma City in KD's MVP season. Of course, that Game 5 loss with Chris Paul losing the ball and doing all that stuff was devastating, and it still hurts to this day to a degree. But I didn't expect us to win that series going into it. However, I was optimistic, and I was talking my trash after Game 1 when we beat the living crap out of them. But, yeah, so in more recent history, this is where it continues. The reason I brought up Lob City is because I wanted to go before even the 2-1-3 era. But the 2019 season is a great example, right? We had no expectations. Tobias Harris, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Pat Bev, Danilo Gallinari, Zoo, Shamet, like those guys really put in a shift every single night. And you saw what a team could do when they just play hard every single night. Play with belief. You can catch a lot of teams lacking in the NBA. So that team was special. And part of it was because of the expectations or lack of them. Then the next season, we all know what happened. Expectations through the roof. Besides the 2013 season, this was the most arrogant I'd say I was as a Clipper fan, but I was even more confident. I thought we were going to win the championship for sure, or at least get to the conference finals for sure. I was talking so much smack to Laker fans that whole year, and you can say I got what I deserved, but they were talking smack, and they never get the karma, in my opinion. I shouldn't say never. Rarely. Compared to us, it's never. If you're talking Lakers and Clippers historically, but of course, a lot of that is long years of great ownership for them and bad ownership for us. But it's a new day. It's the Bomber era. But one thing that has still followed us is the under the radar thing. So everybody was staring at us in 2020, and we blew it in front of the world in the bubble. Or should I say in front of an empty gym, but the games were still in front of the world. And then in 2021, there were still a lot of expectations from the outside world. But I think as Clipper fans, we just said, just get to the conference finals. Like, just please get to the conference finals. And really, it could not get worse than the bubble, right? And it almost did. It almost did when we almost lost to Dallas. My God, that would have, we would have just broken up the team then and there maybe. I mean, that would have been such ridicule. I can't even imagine what would have been said about Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and just our organization. But we did overcome the odds, not by beating Dallas, but by losing Kawhi Leonard and still beating the number one seeded Jazz. Paul George answered the critics when no one expected him to. And then the next season, no one really expected us to do much when Paul George was healthy, they did, but then he missed 51 games for us to still get 42 wins. Again, under the radar. And then going back to last season, people are picking us to win the championship. We're one of the highest odds to win the championship in Vegas. Total, catastrophe. So going back to being a little more under the radar this season, maybe history repeats itself and we get a really great season. That's just the Clipper optimist in me. Coming up, how much of all this scheduling stuff has to do with the fact that this is the last season of the Clippers in the Staples Center? Going to be talking about that coming up. All right. So I don't think I've mentioned it too much in this podcast, and when I mean this podcast, I mean all the episodes. But this really is the last year of the Clippers in the Staples Center. For me, a little bit emotional because this is where I first went to my Clipper game. Where I went to my first Clipper game, where I've had all these memories being a Clipper fan and going to various other games, even seeing what it's like for Laker games, and obviously being a Kings fan and going to games for Kings games. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. But besides my sentimental stuff, because nobody wants to hear about that, the Clippers, right? How does it affect them? Well, I think because the Staples Center, or because the Clippers are third priority at the Staples Center, the Crypto.com arena, they have always gotten the short end of the stick, right? When there's both teams playing on a Sunday, we're the ones playing at 12:30 unless it's a nationally televised game that is slated for us to be the prime time attraction at 6:30, which is not usually the case. So we get all those 12:30 games, right? Always have. Lakers, the only way they're getting a 12:30 game on a Sunday is if it's on national television. That's the only reason. And the Kings have priority over us because initially the stadium was built mainly for the Kings, which Laker fans hate hearing for some reason, even though it's a true fact. But it seems as though in the last couple of years, we've gotten it even worse. And I do think it's because we're going to the Intuit Dome. I do think it's like Staples Center's like, all right, you want to leave? Because they're losing. They're going to be losing money, losing a tenant. Absolutely going to be losing money. Now it's going to be a less busy building. And I think that makes it less special of a stadium. But I am a Clipper fan, and that's one of the things I loved about the Staples Center was we're the only stadium where you could see two different basketball teams play. I thought that was awesome, and I am going to miss that. I really am. But, I think the change will absolutely be for the better. And it's going to be absolutely for the better. Number one, more than anything, that the scheduling will be more on our watch. We can do a Laker and Clipper game at the same time if need be. The only con to that is the local TV ratings, which I don't know how much Ballmer cares about that. I think he does, but that's a conversation for another day. I don't think the Lakers and the Clippers will be playing home games too much on the same night, but I do think now it's like, okay, so what if they are? We can still play on the same night. It doesn't matter. And I think that's going to be awesome. Goodbye 12:30 games all the time. 10 of our 41 home games this season being 12:30 on a Saturday or Sunday, that's garbage. That's ridiculous. That miles traveled thing, it just feels as though we're getting shafted. And then Brian Windhorst, who's a respected, credentialed media member for ESPN, saying that they've gotten it even worse the last couple of years. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it at all. And you know what? I know what people that are not Clipper fans might say listening to this. Look at you crying wolf, playing the victim and all that. Listen, I do think a lot of Clipper fans like to play the victim a lot. But man, we always get the short end of everything. Come on. Let's be realistic. Let's be realistic. The only time the basketball gods have given us anything cool was when David Stern vetoed that trade. Besides that, our number one pick got injured in a preseason game. Blake Griffin. Are we going to talk about Derek Smith and Marcus Johnson? Are we going back to the 80s? How about Bill Walton? You want to keep going? Sean Livingston. Come on, son. I'm not going to use Michael Olowokandi because we picked Michael Olowokandi. And we did have Donald Sterling. And you know what? We deserved everything until Ballmer took over. But now, come on. 2-3-1 leads blown back to back. We're the two most recent teams to blow a 3-1 lead is the Clippers. Actually, no, it's not. The Warriors. Warriors were the last one before the Clippers in 2020. But, hey, two of them in the last 3-1 leads blown in the span of 6 seasons is a little brutal. But, hey, at the end of the day, can't just be feeling sorry for the team and ourselves as fans. Actually, no, I do feel sorry for the fans. I really do. The players, when they get injured, I definitely feel sorry for them. But when they lose and they're healthy and all that, nah, not at all. They're getting compensated pretty nicely, doing the best job in the world. Job that everybody dreams of doing, but just some people just don't have, obviously, the commitment, but the physical gifts as well. And these guys are all extremely physically talented, every single one. And that's why they're the best of the best. But that is why they get paid so handsomely. And that is why I don't feel bad for them unless they really get injured. If you lose, man, come on. Like, I feel bad for us that care so much. We have no impact. We have no control of the game. I'm being harsh, though. Of course I feel bad for people when they lose. Of course. But when you are lethargic or don't care, or some performances the Clippers put out, no, I don't feel that sorry for them. I think the basketball gods will reward you. Jesus, I'm getting so caught up on my words in this episode. I'm sorry, guys. But I think the basketball gods will reward teams that do things the right way. And I think the right way is very cliche, but approach every game trying to win. Don't take it for granted. Don't think you can just turn it on in the playoffs when you don't have that championship pedigree. And when I say championship pedigree, I mean the squad together, not 2 or 3 individuals. Like, Ty Lue Powell and Kawhi. That's 3 guys. No, everybody needs to get it. You're not a championship team together, so let's build those habits. They say they want to take it more seriously. Let's see. But moral of the story, in the Intuit Dome, this is going to change. And I think the Clippers' terrible schedule this season is a big result of it being the last season in the Staples Center. And they're giving us the big middle finger. But anyway, that's it for me in this one. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod. Subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA Clipper content. And, of course, Locked On Clippers, free and available on all your favorite podcast platforms and on YouTube. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you know every single time we post a video. And let me know what you thought of the episode. Of course, I'm always taking constructive criticism, and I want to hear how to become better because we're going into now year 2, and I want to definitely try to take it to the next level if I can. And, of course, let me know what you thought of what I talked about in the episode, being under the radar, what it has to do with Intuit Dome and the Staples Center. Let me know. Love you, Clipper Nation. The age-old proverb continues, go Clippers.